The trade unions and the workers' organizations, which have obviously critical roles to play on the ground. They're on the front lines of the workplace, which is affected, and their livelihoods affected by climate change, sometimes in very harmful ways to workers' health. And they're on the front lines of helping migrant workers who are going and preparing them to go to new destinations or returning through migrant resource centers. Sometimes even after COVID, we saw wage theft and helping them reclaim the wages that they were owed, ensuring they don't have contracts substituted. So climate change exacerbates the burden and also the role and responsibility of workers' organizations in this area. And so I'm really happy that Paola Camilli has joined us. Building and Woodworkers International, which she will tell you is one of the biggest trade union confederations around the world, with I think over 20 million workers. So they represent a lot of the workforce, but mainly in construction. And this is one of the most impacted sectors, if you look at some of our previous studies as well, the ILO, one of the most impacted sectors by climate. So I'm really happy, Paola, to turn over to you and ask you how you see these issues and how you think workers, how you're responding to these issues and assisting migrant workers and others. Thanks.
Great, thanks Michelle, and good morning everybody. Can I just add my voice to the congratulations that were done to the ILO for leading this discussion on climate change and labor mobility, because we really need a strong ILO on the forefront of this discussion, which is new also to us, and we are learning about it. But this panel and the guidelines you've just published really recognize that there is a connection between climate change and labor mobility, and this connection is not is not often seen, or these two issues are considered separate in the debate about policy and planning. But for us as trade union movements, they are clearly connected. And yes, this is a big issue in construction and for construction workers that the BWI represents, but I hope I can do justice also for the other global union federations, and of course the ITUC, who are also at the forefront of this debate, and they are in the workplaces in other sectors. So well, you said it clearly, Michelle, in your introduction. The reality is that millions of workers have already been displaced by extreme climate event or disaster, and not only that they have been forced to leave their countries, but they are also supporting their family members whose lives have been upturned by climate events. So more we follow, most probably. You already gave a huge number to this process, but more we follow as the climate crisis worsens. So we see it in many urban areas. You mentioned Lindsay. Urban areas are receiving an increased number of climate-induced migrants that are seeking jobs in those sectors that are often informal, like construction, the sectors I represent, but also service or domestic work. And here is the risk that they enter into a vicious cycle of exploitation becomes even greater. So our main challenge as union movement is really to bring climate migrants entering the labor market in the destination countries under the protection of the international core labor standards and under our full protection, so that they have the same rights as those workers that are local, including the right to organize, the right to join a union, and the right to be covered by collective agreements, which is not often the case. So my first point would really be that international labor standards that center on workers' agency are particularly important for migrant workers as they seek access to decent work in the face of extreme climate events, notwithstanding, of course, the importance of legal pathways to migration that was widely mentioned before. So in the union movement, you say, well, I will try to give a human face to the phenomenon we are discussing, because in the union movement, we really have many examples of actions in both the departure countries, transit and destination countries, who are trying to strengthen both the adaptation and the mitigation dimension of migration, and they are looking on one side at the integration of climate migrants. I'm not sure this term is correct, but I'll use this to shorten the definition into the society and the labor market of the destination countries through organizing, through bargaining, and also through climate positive actions that make decent green jobs in the destination countries. And on the other side, they are looking at climate mitigation measures that help making migration a choice and not a necessity, especially in the origin countries, which are more vulnerable to climate disasters. So these are different. Of course, there are different angles, but central to both these actions or these angles is the development of decent work opportunities in the climate transition. So, as said, many good examples. We don't have time to describe them all. I've picked two, which are on the two poles, let's say. So they are from Argentina. You mentioned regional migration flows are also important, and India, traditionally sending country. So the one from Argentina concerns the brick making industry, where in some areas the labor force is made of climate displaced migrant workers, often women, I have to say, from other parts of the region. So they are part very often of the informal economy. They work with home-based brick kilns that are generating emissions. They are risky for their health, and they're also generating a lot of waste. So the union in Argentina, in cooperation with the local government, has created brick kilns cooperative parks where migrant brick kiln workers can come together on a larger site, so transition towards a more formal economy, accessing the informal economy, but especially leave their homes, so get out of their houses, and they're given there the opportunity to work with kilns that are that generate less waste because they're not home-based, and improve the working conditions, the health of these workers, and also prevent forms of child labor that exist when work is carried home-based. So the other example, and I go to the other site in terms of traditionally departure country, comes from India. In India, and it's an example of union-based, community also based mitigation measure that is also providing for decent work to salt mine workers in India. These are women, and the example comes from the Self-Employed Women Academy, SEWA, that has trained more than 1,000 women salt workers in the installation of solar panels. So you might wonder what solar panels and salt mining have to do with each other, but we do know that salt workers' work and livelihood depend on natural resources, and is carried out in lands that are subject to extreme heat waves, desertifications, and plus in the production process of salt, women salt workers often use diesel pumps, which are polluting, which are harmful for their health. So the union there is training salt miners in the installation and maintenance of solar panels that are replacing the solar pumps. And in this way, they have managed to create an alternative livelihood for the workers there, making the workers, through the training, through their own skills in installing and maintaining the solar panels, agents of that change. So now they can access renewable energy, now their workload has decreased, and they also use more efficient, adopt more efficient outputs, and in this way they mitigate the effect of climate change in the community, and in this way the involuntary migration is somehow prevented, and they can have the choice to stay with their own community because the work has become more bearable and decent. So I think I took these two examples, well, maybe because they are example related also to a gender dimension, which is often in the construction environment at least a bit, well, I wouldn't say disregarded, but it's a male-dominated sector, and here we really see the power of the transformation for women workers as well, who can turn to integration and agency and change and the power for development. And I do hope that this example that try to give a human face to the issues that we are facing can re-emphasize the call for the inclusion of a human dimension, of a social dimension, and a decent work dimensions into the climate change discussions. And this is for us the way forward for sustainable development in all the aspects of sustainable development, environmental, social, and economic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula. Very powerful examples. And women. And women in construction. Of course, Paula is here with us, but I mean, as an example of this, but really important to hear those stories and how communities are really taking this transition on, but also in terms of making migration a choice and not a necessity, which is so important. But also I heard about building skills for alternative livelihoods, and these skills, of course, whether they're for migrants or national workers, really can help us make this transition. So the investment in that is so important. So thank you, and of course, women entrepreneurship, which is great. Now is the time to open the floor to questions that you can ask or comments you'd like to make. I see a couple of hands already going up, several hands. So let me start, and maybe we take a few questions, and then I can turn to the panel to answer them, if that's okay with everyone. So let's see. First, sorry, I think over here we had a first question, and then we'll move to the right side, and then we'll move back to the the center, so the left. So please, go ahead. Do you have we need someone to carry the microphone or to hand over the microphone. So. Yes.
Hi, good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you.
Please state your name and your affiliation. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that.
Yep. My name is Aka Ribon. I come from the island of Kiribati. I'm a researcher, PhD student at the Australian National University. My research is focused on providing an economic adaptation to climate change. I come from an island that's barely 2 meters above sea level, so there is no higher ground to go to. We're now informing our young population to make informed choices through migration. And that's a last choice, right? Because we don't want our people to migrate. It's a loss of identity, loss of culture. It's a sad reality. But to be informed, we want to do this and make sure that our young people have an option if they have to decide about their futures. So my question, I guess, is really to the panel, because I was involved in government. I worked for the government of Kiribati at a time when we promoted climate policy of migration with dignity. And it was very debated, controversial, because nobody wanted to see our people move, until it came to a point where our people realized that, yes, the changes are here. Spring tides are becoming more frequent. We have to do something, and one of them has to be migration.